You're connected to Business Wrap. Find us online at businesswrap.biz, on Twitter using handle AskBizWrap, and on Facebook just search Business Wrap. And now, Be Insured with Luke Mardigian, presented by Farm Bureau Insurance.
Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Luke Mardigian, and you are listening to Be Insured, a show where we discuss a variety of topics related to insurance, business, leadership, so you can stay protected and make sure that you are insured. One of the most common questions I get from my auto clients is, why did my rate go up? And in part one, we talked a lot about how medical costs and liability claims are getting more expensive and more frequent. Today, we really want to talk to you, our listeners, about how you can save more money and some of the reasons that are really impacting your rate. So one of the topics that we discussed off air prior to the show was this concept of mini tort. In Michigan, we have a law that allows the not at fault party to recover some costs from the at fault party. For the most part, no fault, you go to your own policy. This is one exception. Justin, can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can. And like you said, generally it goes back to your damage goes back to your own policy. So that's where it's important to make sure that you are covered and covered properly. And that's where having a good agent is very important. But there is one small exception. There is a maximum amount of $1,000 you can recover from the other party for property damage that is not covered by your own policy. So to the extent that you have a $500 deductible or a $1,000 deductible, you can recover that from the other at-fault party. And this is where fault does matter as well. If you are partially at fault, your contributive fault does impact what you can recover from the other party.
And that is specific to the physical damage to the car. There's no other claim that can be made against the mini tort other than the physical damage to the car. So, like I said, if you have no insurance on that vehicle, and it's worth $1,000 or $10,000, the most you will ever get is $1,000 for that vehicle.
Yeah, and that's actually why a lot of my clients are beginning to move to use some insurances. Regular collision with a $1,000 deductible. You have some options in Michigan. The most common are broad form and regular. Broad form means that if you're not at fault, you don't pay your deductible. Regular means regardless of fault, you pay your deductible. Well, because of the mini tort, back in the day, broad form was the gold standard, because if you got into an accident 8 hours away, you could just submit the claim and not worry about the deductible. But in today's world, you get an accident 8 hours away, all you need is your police report, a copy of your check that shows you paid your deductible, and a copy of the estimate, and you can typically recover that $1,000 up to $1,000 from the other company pretty quick. I had one that took, the longest I've ever had it take was 3 months, but for the most part, it's less than a week that my clients are getting checks.
And we, we process those. I mean, that's, when our insureds are, happen to be at fault, and so we work that. So you're exactly right, and it is very simple just to produce what the adjuster is looking for is just proof that there's damages to the vehicle. The police report proves who's at fault, and photos will go, and then obviously the insurance, the certificate of insurance, just to prove that you have insurance on the vehicle.
Sure, and you guys may be able to speak to the insurance side. That isn't a coverage that you choose, isn't it? The mini tort coverage for your own policy. So if I cause an accident, is my insurance going to cover it or not? Is that a portion of your policy that you choose?
It's an option. It's an optional coverage. Yep. I mean, it's a very rare because it's so inexpensive. It's pennies,
dollars every 6 months.
But this is where it's important to make sure that you are covered as well.
Yes,
is to have that. For how cheap it is, it makes very little sense not to have it. Otherwise, if you do cause a fender bender, we know in anywhere. You dent in somebody's fender, you're looking at $1,000 easy. So it makes sense to have that coverage on your policy as well.
Yep, and if you look at your declaration page at home, it's going to say property damage buyback or property damage payment, something along those lines. It's going to be very inexpensive coverage. If you don't see it, then you need to call your agent and talk about that. That's why adding that coverage for dollars every 6 months and then going from broad form to regular form, it's more expensive to have broad form, right? Because the company is taking out an extra $1,000 of liability if you're in an accident and you're not at fault.
Now, Luke, are you seeing more insureds that are opting to take the regular collision today?
Absolutely, because costs are rising, so they're looking for every way to save money. And typically, the conversation goes like this: when's the last time you were in a car accident? I've never been in a car accident. 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Okay, great. You've been paying for a coverage that you haven't used for 10 years. because you weren't in an accident. So the broad form has done no benefit to you, and you've paid hundreds, thousands of dollars to insurance companies that you didn't receive any benefit from. So let's switch it to regular, roll the dice. If you do get into a car accident and you're at fault or you're not at fault, you just recover that deductible from the at-fault party, the other car who hit you, and everything's good. You're now at break even, and you paid lower premiums for years.
And it makes a lot of sense. And, looking at your, as you said, reviewing your policy, and that goes back again to, having the proper agent and to review it. And, you buy things online and, might not have a full explanation or what have you. So it's very important to have the right agent look at it. And if you're going to reduce premiums, you just got to be careful where you're reducing them at. If you decide, well, I haven't been in an accident for 10 years, well, I'm just going to drop down the state minimum. Because there are state minimums in terms of the policy. Well, the state minimums may not, be proper for you.
Yeah, generally as a rule of thumb, I advise my clients that if they make over $60,000, they should have $500,000 in liability. And most clients go, do I really need $500,000? That seems like a lot of money. It's really not. As we talked about in last week's episode, liability cost, the amount that companies are settling for is rising steadily. And because of that, getting to that $500,000 mark is not that hard, especially because now we're throwing in pain and suffering and wage loss and a number of other issues.
Sure. Yeah. And especially for the cost of coverage, it's really not that much between.
No, it's like dollars.
Right. So in terms of going with the 2040, which really doesn't cover you very much at all, $20,000 in liability is really nothing here in Michigan. So for the cost to be insured up to $500,000, it only makes sense. And then to get umbrellas on top of that, it really, you're covering yourself here in Michigan. So,
and it's a great point in terms of that. And, but it's the agent, that works with the agent to, figure out what the real needs are in terms of what limits are proper.
Absolutely. And it really is individual. So if you're listening today and your agent just gave you whatever coverage, you need to sit back down with them and make sure that you know exactly what you have and why you have it. That's the number one. I actually ask every client, so did you come up with these coverages or did your agent? And the most common answer is, oh, my agent did, or this online internet company gave me a good, better, best option, and I picked the better. So I thought I was doing okay because I didn't pick the good option. And really, reality is, they make over six figures and they should have a $2 million umbrella, and there should be all types of more coverages that they just don't have.
Yeah, if you're just looking for, I just want to pay the lowest premium, but you're not looking at what that's actually covering you for, you're really missing out, and you're paying for something that's probably not going to help you in the long run as well. And paying just a little bit more can get you a lot more coverage in Michigan.
And I think when people make choices like that, they're believing that they'll never be involved, that they'll be at fault in a car accident.
Right. Yeah.
But things happen.
They've done studies. If you ask people if they think they're a good driver, like 80% of society says, yes, I'm a good driver, but we have, hundreds of thousands of accidents every year. We all kind of have this illusion of confidence that we can be really good at driving all the time, and it's just not possible. Even professionally trained people like police officers and firefighters who go to schools for days to learn how to drive get in car accidents.
Right. And it's not, are you a good driver? It's who you're sharing the roadway with as well.
Yep.
You can be a perfect driver, but another person collides with you and, oh my gosh, I didn't plan on getting into an accident this morning going into work. And all of a sudden now you've got this burden thrown upon yourself, and making sure that you're, having your insurance coverage is essential here in Michigan. So it takes a headache away from you down the road when somebody does collide with you.
And what's interesting is that, if you go along for 10 years with no auto accident, you think, well, whatever. But talk to someone that's been involved in an accident. Talk to someone that was unfortunately at fault in an accident. And talk to someone that unfortunately did injure someone, and have them explain what they went through. And if they had the proper coverage, it's very good to have. I mean, that's what you have insurance for, is the, proper protection.
Absolutely. And when it comes to cost on that, that's what that's kind of the feedback I get from every client is, okay, you're increasing my coverage, but it's going to cost me more. And I say, yeah, it is, but there's some ways that we can save. One of the ways is, again, moving to a higher deductible and what's called comprehensive and collision. Comprehensive on a really basic level is just everything other than two cars colliding or your car colliding with something. So think deer hits, stolen cars, vandalism, those types of things. chipped windshields, cracked windshields are part of that. The collision side is where you collide with somebody else or you collide with something. You hit a pole, house, whatever.
The policy says, collision or upset. And you bring up, now you're really getting into, talking about, policies increasing, premiums increasing. Now we're looking at the physical damage side. And, we'll start out, you mentioned windshields.
Yep.
And so what we're seeing in the industry with windshields is, we would see windshields, $500, $600, whatever. Now what's happening is, it's great that the automobiles, they have the cameras and the sensors and, for safety assist and that. Yep. That's awesome. But what happens is now, they'll take the rear view mirror off of the windshield, and when they go to put it back on, it's got to be recalibrated. And that calibration costs up to $500. So it could possibly double the cost of what a windshield is. So look at your, when you look at your comprehensive and your collision premiums, the cost to repair vehicles, is so much higher. We see, we've seen headlights, that you would think, go back 15, 20 years and,
$20 bulb at AutoZone, right?
That's all it is. We see them now. We can see a headlight for $1,600.
Holy cow. And that's really contributing on a major level to our increased costs. That's the area that I've actually seen whenever I have this question from clients of why has my policy gone up? I dig into it. I compare every line of coverage, and the most common one that went up was collision and comprehensive. And it's because of that, not just because of the increased cost of repairs, because it had like $1,600 instead of $20, but also the frequency. I used to be a cop, and I still talk to the cops, and they are seeing an epidemic level of texting and driving, where cars are getting rear-ended left and right because people are staring down at their phones. So it's happening more often, and it costs more to now replace that headlight they just broke.
And we see that as well. We see it from, going both ways, and distracted driving. That's exactly, we've seen, 69% of all accidents are, based on distracted driving now, which we didn't have that. The cell phone is awesome. It's convenient. It does a lot of things, but when it takes our eyes, focus, and it takes it off the wheel, off the windshield, bad things happen.
Yep. Driving is a divided attention task, meaning that you're already doing two things at once. So you can't throw a third thing on. Listeners today, if you want to lower your insurance costs, texting and driving and being on the phone and driving are the two ways. If you stop doing that, you're going to decrease your chance of being in an accident. And overall, if everybody did that, it would lower costs across the nation for auto insurance.
And there's emphasis. We see it every day in the insurance industry, just different articles and things and studies that other states do regarding distracted driving. That's how important it is. And everybody knows it. And it's so easy to do, just speaking, from a humanistic nature that, you have a phone, the text goes off, you kind of glance at it a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're texting. Definitely not a good thing.
No, it's not. And you will be held liable for it. And so then your insurance company is going to pay out, and your rates are probably going to go up eventually because they had to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. Another optional coverage. To go back, physical damage, raising your deductibles is going to help you save some cost. Essentially, insurance companies saying, hey, if you're willing to take some of this on, we're going to give you a break on your price. So for comprehensive, it can, to go from from a $100 deductible to a $500 deductible, it can almost cut your cost in half on comprehensive. But comp is not the big cost. Collision is usually the more expensive coverage, I've seen, $600-700 every 6 months just for that coverage. The best way to save on those is, number one, when you're shopping cars, don't just buy what looks really good. Make sure that you have an agent that can work with you. My office every day is working with clients on who are shopping for cars, and they say, hey, I'm really interested in this car and this car. What's the cost? And we educate our clients to do that. So if you don't have an insurance agent who's going to help you with that, find a new one. Or if you have an online company, find an agent who can help you shop those differences. Because, for instance, I priced out the Chevy Tahoe. We're in Michigan. This is GM town here in Lansing. And we priced out the Chevy Tahoe versus the Chevy Equinox. Now, the Tahoe cost almost 3 times as much as the Equinox. It cost exactly the same to insure because of the safety features, the side airbags, the camera that lane assist, automatic braking, all the things that are associated with it. It's a lower cost because you're less likely to get injured in that accident.
And when it comes into, when you're talking about cost and rating and that nature, there's so many factors that go into, it's not just the person, it's not just the person driving, it's the vehicle. There are many, many factors that go into it. So we need to pay attention. So, it's many variables coming into one. Absolutely.
Car you're driving, who you are, what your driving history is, where you live, what your police response is, what your fire department's response is. There's so many pieces that come into play. And that's why it's so important to have a good insurance agent who is going to teach you how to be insured. This is Luke Mardigian with the Mardigian Agency Farm Bureau Insurance, and I was with
Roger Graff
and Justin Maxim from Chase Bylenga, Halston, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Thanks so much for listening in.